let's dive into a question that I think gets at the heart of who we are. Is your personality just your mood, or is there something more stable underneath it all? Today, we're going to unpack that really tangled relationship between the personality trait of neuroticism and what it feels like to be depressed or anxious. And we're going to use some fascinating new research to help us pull them apart.
I mean, really think about it for a second. We all have bad days, right? Or even a bad week where we feel anxious or just down. But does that mean you have a depressive personality? Or is that just the emotional weather of the moment? Is it separate from the underlying climate of who you really are? Honestly, this is one of the biggest debates in psychology.
And for a long, long time, a lot of top researchers have basically said they're almost the same thing. This quote here says that neuroticism, that tendency to feel negative emotions, and things like depression are so tied together, they're fungible. That's a fancy word for interchangeable. Like you can pretty much swap one for the other. But is that really the whole story?
Okay, so let's get into this puzzle. Before we can solve it, we really need to be clear about what we're even talking about. What are these two things we're trying to separate?
So on one hand, you've got neuroticism. The best way to think about it is like your emotional climate. It's a pretty stable, long-term part of you, your general default setting for negative feelings. On the other hand, you have disorders like depression and anxiety. These are much more like the daily weather. They come and go, they're episodic, and the symptoms can change dramatically from day to day.
So this raises the million-dollar question. If they can look and feel so alike, how in the world can we tell them apart? And maybe more importantly, why should we even bother? Well, it turns out the answer to that question could change everything from how we get a diagnosis to how we design treatments that actually work. To get those answers, researchers knew they couldn't just take a single snapshot of a person. They needed to see how all this stuff plays out in the real world every single day. So they designed a really clever study to get a peek inside people's minds. They used what's called a daily diary study. So instead of asking people, hey, how have you felt for the past month? They actually checked in with them every single evening to get a real-time report card on their thoughts and feelings as they were happening. For this study, they got 119 young adults, and they specifically chose this group because a lot of them were already dealing with at least some mild symptoms of depression or anxiety. Then, every single one of these people tracked their inner world for 7 days straight. And when you do the math, that gave the researchers a grand total of 758 daily observations. That is a ton of rich data, giving them this amazing, dynamic picture of how thoughts, feelings, and personality all dance together. So what did they find in all that data? Well, the first big clue came from a pattern they found in the way that we all think, every single day. They found that our daily thoughts tend to fall into two big buckets. First, you've got internal past thoughts. This is when your mind is turned inward, you're focused on your own feelings, you're chewing on problems, or you're dwelling on something that happened in the past. But then you've got external present thoughts. This is when your attention is pointed outward, to right now, to other people, to things happening out in the world. Okay, so we've got these two different modes of thinking. The next obvious question is, what do they do to us? How do these thought patterns actually affect the way we feel moment to moment?
Well, no big surprise here. The connection was crystal clear. On days when people spent more time stuck in those internal past thoughts, just ruminating on their problems and feelings, well, their negative feelings were way, way higher. But here's the really powerful flip side. On the days that participants spent more time focused on the external present, just on the here and now, the world outside their own head, they reported way more positive feelings. Their good moods went up. So, our focus shapes our feelings. We got it. But that brings us right back to the big mystery. Can this finally help us settle the score between neuroticism as a stable trait and depression as a temporary state? And here it is, the verdict. The study found that neuroticism and depression are not the same thing. Even after you account for how depressed or anxious a person is feeling right now, their level of neuroticism still has its own separate, significant impact on their daily mood. It's an independent player in the game. Okay, so they're separate. But why is this such a big deal? Why does untangling these two things actually matter for us in the real world? To get why it matters, we have to zoom in one more level. You see, neuroticism isn't just one big blob. It's made up of more specific parts that psychologists call facets. And this study looked really closely at two of them in particular, self-consciousness and angry hostility. And this is where it gets really specific and really cool.
They found these facets have different jobs. High self-consciousness wasn't just about feeling bad. It was specifically linked to having fewer good feelings. It kind of sucks the joy out of the room. Meanwhile, high angry hostility was uniquely tied to having more bad feelings. They affect our emotions in very different ways.
So what does this all mean for us? Well, a lot, actually. For one, it helps us draw a clear line between a person's underlying personality and an active diagnosis. That could lead to way more personalized treatments. Maybe someone high in self-consciousness needs help building positive experiences, while someone high in angry hostility needs tools to manage negative flare-ups. It also gives us some real science to back up what many of us already feel, that being mindful and present can be a powerful mood booster. And finally, it helps explain a weird puzzle, why some therapies get rid of symptoms, while others seem to change our personality over time. It's because they might be hitting two totally different targets.
So, at the end of the day, this research leaves us with a really powerful idea. It shows that our personality and our moods are connected, for sure, but they are distinct. And the bridge between them is very often built out of our daily thoughts. It kind of puts a little bit of the control back in our hands. And it just makes you wonder, where are you going to choose to point your attention today?